Let's now actually learn how to manipulate classes with JavaScript. But the first thing that we have to do is to actually react to a click on each of these buttons here. So right now, of course, nothing happens. And so now we need to attach an event handler to each of these three buttons. Now we finished the last video by learning how we can do something for all of these three buttons at the same time, right? So for that, we used a for loop, which loops over this node list, which is basically an array holding all of the buttons. And so this buttons open modal at position number I is the current button element in each iteration. And then from there, we simply read the text content property just like on any other element. All right. But now let's take it one step further. And instead of simply reading the text content property, we will call the addEventListener method, just like we learned in the last project. Okay, so remember, in order to respond to a click event, we will attach an event handler function to the element. And event handler and event listener are pretty much the same thing. So that's why this method is called event listener. So let's say add event listener, and then the name of the event, and that is once more the click event. And then the second argument is the function which will contain the code that should be executed once the button is clicked. So that will be an anonymous function, remember, so a function without a name, and it is of course also a function expression, because it's simply this value here. So this function value. So just as I explained multiple times already, but it's important to keep remembering this stuff as we go here through this section. And to start, let's simply log to the console the text content of the button that was clicked. Now here there's actually a mistake, because of course we don't want to log to the console this event listener, right? That doesn't make any sense. Instead, we now want to log something to the console right here inside this handler function. So that's just CL again. And then let's just say button clicked. Give it a save. And now each of these three buttons here has their own event handler function attached to it. So button clicked. And when we clicked on this one, then the same should appear. And indeed, now we have two. So that's what this 2 means. And as we click here, we get another one and another and another. And so, yeah, this worked. So we attached this function here now to all of the three buttons. And again, because we did it here in the loop while we were looping over this node list, which contains all of these three buttons. Okay, but now, of course, this is not the only thing that we want to do. Instead, we want to display the modal. And remember that this modal is already in the HTML. It is hidden right now because it has the hidden class. If it did not have this hidden class, it would be visible. Let me actually show that. So I delete it, and if I save it now, then you see here is the modal. Right? Here it is. And that's because the hidden class is now gone. And so basically this is exactly what we will do using JavaScript. So removing this class. Okay? So what we want to do is to take the modal, so this element that we selected here previously, right? So we selected it and then stored it into this variable. And so now we take that selected element, and on there we can read the class list property. So that's class list. And then this class list property itself has a couple of methods. And the one we're going to use now is remove. And as I just explained, the class that we're going to remove is the class called hidden. Okay? And we can actually also remove multiple classes. For that, we just have to pass them in with commas like this. So here we then can specify more classes. Just keep in mind that we do not use the dot here. So not like this, okay? And I'm telling you that because I used to do that mistake myself and I remember that. And so yeah, I want you to avoid it. So the dot is only for the selector. But here we are not anymore selecting anything. We're just passing in the name of the class. And so all we need is a string with that name. Okay? Now, besides removing classes, we can also add classes, and we can even check if an element contains a certain class or not. And we will use all of them in this video and the next one. Okay, and this should actually already do the trick. So when I save this now, and let's click here, and it worked. Great. So the hidden class is now gone, and I can show that to you here using the inspect. And then we need to give it some more space back. And then you see here the modal class that used to be here is no longer there. Now we can of course not close it because that functionality is not yet there, but at least now it is open. Now we also have the overlay, which is this one, which also has the hidden class. And so in order to show that overlay, we need to remove the hidden class from this element as well. So that's easy enough. It's just the same thing again. So overlay dot class list dot remove, and then again hidden. All right. And yeah, beautiful. That's really nice. So using classes like this is a really great and handy way of manipulating web pages. And in practice, adding and removing classes like we just did here is the main way in which we change styles on websites. That's because a class basically aggregates many styles in just one class. Now in this case, actually the hidden class only contains this one style here. So this would have been the same as specifying the display style directly in JavaScript. So like we learned in the last project. So we could have done also modal.style.display and then set it to block, I guess, or what was it? Yeah, nothing. So basically, display none means that it's not visible. And if we want it to be visible, we would set it to display block. Okay, so this would do the exact same thing, but you can see that it's a bit more of a pain because then we would have to memorize what exactly we have to write here. So the exact property name and the exact value. And this is only for one style. Imagine that the hidden class actually had 10 properties. Then we would have to write all of these properties here manually and change all their values. So that's a lot of work and it's not fun. And so instead, we can basically aggregate all of these properties in one class that we then define here in CSS. And then in JavaScript, we simply add and remove these classes as we need or don't need these styles. So usually when you need to manipulate styles on a page, then always just export the styles into a class and then use the class just like we did here. All right. Now what we just did here is for showing the modal window, but now let's also add the ability of then hiding it by clicking that button. So this button here. Okay. So right now, as I said, it's not possible to close the window unless we reload the whole page. So let's take this button here that we already selected and simply add an event listener to that one as well. So button close modal dot add event listener, and again waiting for the click event, and then let's specify our function here again. Okay, so again we are just defining the function here. We are not calling it itself. It is the JavaScript engine who will call this function as soon as the click event happens on exactly this element. All right. Anyway, here we now want to do the opposite. So basically we want to add the class back on. So modal.classList.add this time. And so we add the hidden class back on, which will then hide the modal. And the same actually for the overlay. So let's just duplicate this line here. and change this to overlay. And yeah, this should already work. So that already worked before. And now let's check it. And yes, it does. And it should work for all the 3 buttons, of course. And yeah, it does. Great. So again, this is a very common thing to do. We change the appearance of websites and of elements like this all the time using this class technique. Next up, usually when we click outside of a modal, then the modal window also closes. So that's pretty common, right? So what I mean is clicking this area here outside should also close this window. So basically we want this code here to also be executed when we click on the modal, or actually on the overlay. So let's do that. So overlay dot add event listener click. And now what should I do? Well, just to make it work, I can copy this code here, but you already know that this is not a good idea, probably. But let's just, for now, see if it works. So if we click outside, so this is the overlay. So as we click it now, then indeed the modal and the overlay are both hidden again. Great. So this works now, but again, we do not want this same code here in these 2 places. We want actually the exact same function to be executed no matter if we click the close button or if we click the overlay. So how should we do that? Well, we can simply export this function into a more real named function. So let me cut the code from here, and then I will create a function called close modal. So const close modal equals this function value. Okay, and so now this variable here is what holds the function value. And so what I can do now is to here specify that close modal function. And that's it. That's the function right here. So this here, what we have here, is exactly the same as this. And again, notice that we are not calling the function. We are not doing this, right? This would not work at all because it would immediately call the function as soon as JavaScript executes this line. But that's not what we want to happen. We want the close modal function to be executed only as soon as the click event happens on the close modal button. All right? And now here we can just do the same thing. So again, close modal. And that's it. That's so much better than what we had before. Not only did we make our code more dry, but we also made it more readable, more expressive, and more declarative. So right now, when we read this code here, it's a lot easier to understand. So we just read button close modal, add the event listener of close the modal. Okay, that makes sense. So just by looking at this line, we see that when this element is clicked, then we want to close the modal. The same, when the overlay is clicked, we want to close the modal. All right, and so we know exactly what's going to happen when we read this code. And so for that advantage alone, let's do the same thing here with this function. So the one that opens the modal. So let me grab this one, just put them up here. Can also get rid of this console.log. And so let's put the 2 functions here together. So open modal. And now this function will be just this, right? So I'll just cut it again and paste it here. And so now we assigned this function here to this open modal variable. So once more, a nice function expression. And now we just take that and put it here. Open modal. And of course, again, we don't call it. We simply declare, or we define it here and tell JavaScript, hey, whenever a click happens on one of these buttons, then please call this function that we just specify here. All right. And so this is our code, and it's a lot better. And so actually we just did some refactoring here. And so restructuring our code without changing the functionality. And so that means that our code should still work the same. And indeed, it does. We can open and close in two ways, and we can open it on all of the three buttons. Beautiful. That's really, really great. So to recap, if you want to use the same function in multiple event listeners, then you need to specify that function as a separate function, like this one here, and then you can pass that function as an argument to multiple addEventListener methods. So just like we did it here, right? So that's one of the takeaways of this video. And the other one is that we really, in practice, use the functionality of adding and removing classes all the time in order to change the appearance of elements on our page. And that's because classes allow us to basically aggregate multiple CSS properties in just one, like a container. So each class functions a bit like a container with a lot of properties in it. And then here, by adding and removing them, we basically can activate and deactivate certain styles all at the same time. Okay, so keep that in mind, and even better, actually write notes maybe with what I'm saying, because this is really important stuff. So working with classes is something that we do all the time. And there is a third thing that we do with classes, which is to check if a class is actually present on a certain element. And so that's going to be the topic of the next video, along with learning how to actually deal with a key press event. So that's yet another really exciting video. So let's now check that out.